Brothers, the NBA is completely off his rocker. LeBron is in Philadelphia. Giannis is in Miami. And somehow, that is only the beginning of the chaos in the Eastern Conference. So forget about regular season standings. Today, I am ranking every team in the Eastern Conference from least to most likely to win the whole thing, because this might be the best East we have seen since the 1990s. To kick off this ranking, we are starting at the very bottom. The 5 teams I have missing the postseason in the East next season are the Nets, Bucks, Hornets, Bulls, and Wizards. For most of these squads, putting them here is not very controversial. However, Washington was the one team in this group that gave me pause. If Trae Young and Anthony Davis stay healthy and A.J. Dionza has a stellar rookie season, they could genuinely push for a play-in spot. But in a loaded Eastern Conference, I still see them falling just short. Now let us get into the top 10 teams in the East. Starting at number 10, I have the Atlanta Hawks. And honestly, I do think Washington could jump them. Giving up on Zachary Reese in favor of Lou Dort tells you exactly where Atlanta is at. Zachary Reese was never going to become what you expect from a number 1 overall pick. But Atlanta really didn't need another physical perimeter defender when they already had Dyson Daniels and Aqeel Alexander-Walker. What they actually needed was more skill in shooting around Jalen Johnson. Because with Lou Dort in the mix, their spacing looks even worse. Still, this Atlanta squad is going to be tough to play against. They won 46 games last season. C.J. McCollum can organize the offense. And defensively, they are going to be pretty good. But outside of some flashes from Jalen Johnson, I really don't think this Hawks team has a high ceiling at all. Just being tough and competitive isn't going to cut it in the East, which is why the Hawks land at number 10. Coming in as my 9th most likely team to win the East are the Boston Celtics. Trading away Jaylen Brown for an older, injury-prone Paul George is the main reason I have them falling off. Look, I do believe the Celtics will win plenty of regular season games. Jason Tatum is good enough to beat average teams, and Joe Mazzulla always finds a way to win. But when it comes to who I actually trust to win the East, their playoff weakness feels painfully obvious. You load up on Jason Tatum, force the ball out of his hands, and make the rest of the roster beat you 4 times. It feels like Boston is banking on Peyton Pritchard turning into Jalen Brunson while praying that Paul George can somehow stay healthy. To me, that doesn't sound promising at all. And when you look at the actual basketball X's and O's, their biggest playoff issue last year was a lack of rim pressure because they couldn't get to the basket. They had to constantly settle for 3-point shots. Jaylen Brown was easily their best driver on that roster. And they just traded him for Paul George, who doesn't apply any real pressure on the rim anymore. To me, their biggest weakness just got even worse. During the regular season, I expect their hot shooting and decent defensive play style will earn them a top 6 seed. But once the playoffs start, I just do not see this team winning a championship. Moving up to number 8, I have the Orlando Magic. Now, I haven't been very high on Orlando over the last few seasons, but even I believe they will take a step forward next year. The question is how much better they get under Shan Sweeney coming over from San Antonio to be their head coach. And honestly, almost anyone taking this job will provide a better offensive structure than what Jamal Mosley had in place. Orlando simply had too much talent to look that bad on the offensive end. Their entire game plan was just hunting mismatches for Paulo Banter and Franz Wagner, hoping one of them could make a play alone. Next year, Paulo Banter is their biggest swing piece. His regular season was pretty underwhelming, but once the playoffs started, he played some of the best basketball of his career, nearly leading Orlando to an upset over the number 1 seed Pistons, and none of this was new. Every single time Paulo Banter has reached the playoffs in his career, he has looked more than ready for the big moment. So next year becomes a massive test. Either this is the year Paulo Banter turns into a Jimmy Butler type who cruises through the regular season and peaks in April, or he finally becomes the consistent superstar Orlando drafted first overall. Franz Wagner also needs to stay healthy because he and Paulo Banter have missed far too much time over the last few seasons. The Magic will keep playing elite defense. And under Shan Sweeney, the offense might look a little more functional, but in a conference this stacked, that only gets you as high as number 18. Coming in at number 7 on my list of Eastern Conference contenders, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers. Having them this low might shock some people, but I honestly do not like the direction Cleveland is taking. After failing to land LeBron James, I think this roster looks even worse than it did last year. Sure, James Harden might return in free agency on a team-friendly discount to help them survive the 82-game grind. But this list is about the postseason, and honestly, I think the Cavs might be better off without him. James Harden has shown us for the better part of a decade that he can carry a regular season offense only to completely fall off a cliff once the playoffs begin. During their last playoff run, it seriously felt like the Cavs were winning games in spite of his presence. Donovan Mitchell is still a stud, but he remains an undersized two-guard who struggles against the brutal physicality of postseason basketball. In my book, Cleveland still lacks a clear-cut, championship-level number one option capable of carrying their half-court offense to a title. I also think this roster's depth is looking pretty rough right now. And that situation could get even worse, with rumors swirling that Dennis Schroeder is very likely to get traded before opening night. But hey, they are coming off a fake finals run if you ask Kenny Atkinson, since Cleveland apparently statistically won that series against New York. So, congrats to the Cavs for achieving absolutely nothing. Jokes aside, I think they will probably lock down a top 6 seed in the regular season. But when the playoffs start, that 7th spot is exactly where they belong. Now, coming in as my 6th most likely team to win this brutal Eastern Conference gauntlet next year, I have got the Detroit Pistons. Last year's postseason exposed their fatal flaw. They are completely Cade Cunningham or bust on the offensive end. Detroit tried to fix that spacing issue by bringing in John Collins, Isaiah Joe, and Taurean Prince. On paper, those shooters should give Cade much-needed floor spacing, but none of them play the hard-nosed defense this team's identity demands. So, Detroit faces a tough choice: surround Cade with spacing and bleed points on defense, or go back to Asar Thompson and Ron Holland and maybe Jalen Duran, restoring that gritty defense, but watching your half-court spacing completely suffocate all over again. Over 82 games, an elite defensive squad can mask their offensive flaws just by outworking teams, forcing turnovers, and running the floor for easy transition buckets. But once the playoffs kick off, every opponent matches your energy, and those high-motor regular season squads get brutally exposed because they cannot score in the half court. Detroit was that exact team last year, just like Houston was the season before. Cade Cunningham is a certified star, but he still lacks a legitimate second option on offense. Adding catch-and-shoot guys helps, but it is nothing like having a true secondary playmaker who can initiate the offense when Cade rests or gets blitzed. How they handle the Jalen Duran situation could also completely reshape how this roster looks. But until Cade gets some real elite offensive help, Detroit is stuck at number 6. Now we hit the top 5. Coming in as my 5th most likely squad to win the East, the Miami Heat. LeBron James taking his talents to Philly was a massive blow, because he would have plugged nearly every single hole on this Heat roster. Miami desperately needs more shooting, but their absolute biggest hole is the lack of another reliable elite playmaker. LeBron would have anchored the offense, created easy looks for Giannis and Bam, and patched up the playmaking hole that still worries me. Had he picked South Beach, I truly believe the Heat would be entering next season as the absolute team to beat in the East. And as I argued in my last LeBron video, I think he totally got it wrong. So, without LeBron, those glaring offensive questions still plague the Heat. There are rumors they might target Klay Thompson, which definitely boosts their spacing, but remember, we are talking about 2027 Klay here. He certainly does not fix their ball handling or shot creation issues, which are the real problems here. Still, Giannis single-handedly gives them a massive postseason ceiling. Surround him with Bam Adebayo, Andrew Wiggins, and Devon Mitchell, and that defense is going to be an absolute nightmare to play against. They can match up with literally any superstar while having Giannis and Bam behind them to erase every mistake. But the issue is that Giannis is going to be forced to do way too much heavy lifting on offense. Right now, he is their premier playmaker and arguably their primary ball handler, while still needing him to be the dominant force he is. Right now, this looks like an elite defense with a highly mediocre half-court offense, slotting them at number 5. Now, Taking the number 4 spot as Eastern Conference contenders, we have the Philadelphia 76ers. Sure, they won the LeBron James sweepstakes. On paper, this might be the most talented starting 5 in the conference, but I don't think LeBron suddenly makes them an unstoppable juggernaut or the clear-cut favorites. Yes, he makes them way better, but the fit is still pretty weird, and this roster still has some glaring ways it could completely collapse. Offensively, LeBron fixes my absolute biggest concern before the trade. Philly has a ton of scorers who want the ball. Almost nobody can organize them. Now LeBron can step in and play that souped-up Draymond Green role, controlling the tempo and orchestrating everything. That stops every possession from becoming Maxey, Jaylen Brown, and Embiid just taking turns. Plus, their transition game could be ridiculous. You've got Maxey, Brown, and LeBron, who are statically some of the absolute best transition players in the league, alongside VJ Edgecombe, who is a crazy athlete. But I still don't think this offensive fit is completely perfect. Brown and Embiid are not natural off-ball players, and most of this starting 5 ranges from average to shaky from three-point land. Yep, LeBron is an incredible passer. But at the end of the day, there's only one ball, and several of these guys are at their best when they have it. Now, I still think Philadelphia should be a very good offensive team at the bare minimum, simply because the sheer talent they have is completely overwhelming. But I am just not convinced they will build an elite offensive system in Philly. But the much bigger issue here is their interior defense, where Joel Embiid was straight up targeted last postseason. He simply doesn't move like he used to. At this point, he's basically stuck playing deep drop coverage. And because of those nagging leg injuries, he can barely even get off the floor to defend the rim. During that second round series against the Knicks, New York dragged him into pick and roll after pick and roll, completely exposing his lack of mobility to build an elite defense around this version of Joel Embiid. You're going to need rangy athletes, elite perimeter defenders, and multiple guys who can rotate and cover up for him. But Philly doesn't have those pieces. Maxey is too small. And Jaylen Brown still has defensive lapses off the ball. VJ is still incredibly young, and LeBron is being asked to provide secondary rim protection and constant help defense in year 24. That is exactly why Miami would have been a much better destination for LeBron. Giannis and Bam could have easily handled all of the most challenging assignments in the front court, while Andrew Wiggins and Devon Mitchell chased opposing guards and wings all over the floor. LeBron could have been hidden defensively while solving every single issue they had on offense. But in Philadelphia, they need him to run the entire offense, anchor a fragile defense, and stay healthy enough to do it all postseason. And that brings us to the massive question mark hanging over this team health. Embiid has struggled to stay on the court, and betting the final chapter of LeBron's career on Embiid surviving 4 playoff rounds is an immense gamble. And their bench depth isn't nearly as exciting as some people seem to think. Anthony Simons can certainly score, but he's another target on defense, while Dean Wade is a solid defender who gives you almost nothing off the bounce. I expect Philly to have nights where they completely torch teams offensively, but they'll also have nights where they get absolutely run out of the gym. Still, if this roster stays healthy for the postseason, they have the raw talent to win the East. But if you look past that talent, you see a mediocre defense, shaky depth, a weird offensive hierarchy, and no clear championship number 1 player you can truly trust. Honestly, the margin in this top 5 is razor thin. You can wake up tomorrow, shuffle all 5 of these rosters, and still feel great about it because there's barely any separation right now. One minor trade, one injury, or even one tough matchup could completely scramble the standings. The Eastern Conference genuinely feels wide open next season. And coming in at number 3 on my list of teams most likely to win the East, I have the Indiana Pacers. Tyrese Halliburton is finally healthy, and the last time we saw him, he was torching defenses in Game 7 of the Finals, looking like he was about to secure Indiana's first ever title before everything came crashing down. After that devastating Achilles tear, this upcoming season has Revenge Tour written all over it. If you watch my regular season prediction video, you know I had Indiana finishing 8th. But after letting that sit for a week, I think I was probably a little bit too harsh, and right now they look much more like a 6 seed. Halliburton hasn't played in over a year, and Ivica Zubac is a completely different style of center than Miles Turner. Those are my two big concerns. Zubac prefers to play slower and more deliberate around the basket, while Miles Turner's shooting and speed pulls opposing bigs away from the paint. That stretches the floor and opens up driving lanes for Indiana's high-octane offense. Now, the spacing might get clunky with Zubac and Pascal Siakam sharing the front court. Rick Carrier will definitely have some work to do there, but honestly, I trust the Pacers to figure it out. More importantly, this roster is ridiculously deep, and that depth fuels their entire identity. Wanting to push the Pacers one thing on paper, but the Pacers will literally pull the ball out of the net and sprint it right back down your throat on every single possession. Facing them is completely exhausting. You barely have time to process their last bucket before realizing, oh man, here they come again. If your bench is weak, Indiana is going to completely expose you. Every single guy competes at maximum effort for his entire shift, and then Rick Carlisle subs and the next guy who's ready to do the exact same thing. It lets them press full court on defense and run you ragged on offense for an entire series. That is just a brutal, exhausting matchup for anyone to deal with. Aaron Nith provides floor spacing and high-intensity defense. Andrew Nembhard will always hit some wild step-back three-pointer in crunch time. Meanwhile, Pascal Siakam consistently raises his game when the stakes are highest. But Tyrese Halliburton's the engine making this machine run, and I trust him to peak when it matters. Other squads might end up with better regular season records, but the Pacers make way more sense to me as a classic 16-game playoff team. They have a defined identity, immense depth, and a style that forces you to run with them for 7 straight games. Now, I cannot say for sure if they will capture that exact magic from their last postseason run, but I know one thing. They're absolutely good enough to win the Eastern Conference next year. Sliding into my number 2 spot of teams likely to win the East, I actually have the Toronto Raptors. And yes, that sounds wild, but it's genuinely where I rank them right now. Of course, this hinges entirely on the Kawhi Leonard trade actually going through. If that blockbuster deal gets voided tomorrow, then this entire projection is going to look pretty foolish. But if Kawhi is officially back in the 6, I truly believe Toronto becomes one of the East's most balanced rosters. Defensively, this squad could be terrifying. Kawhi was still elite on that end last year, but they might run lineups where he is only their 3rd best defender. That is because Scotty Barnes remains one of the elite defenders in basketball, while Colin Murray Boyles was incredible as a rookie and is quietly becoming a premier young defensive center. The Raptors have the versatile chess pieces to switch almost every single position, protect the paint with multiple rim protectors, and throw waves of defenders at your best scorer. And their depth goes way deeper. Jamal Shead harasses opposing ball handlers, while Emmanuel Quickley, R.J. Barrett, and Jacoby Walter provide serious offensive punch in the backcourt. At the end of the day, this roster is packed with tough, defensive-minded players who contribute to winning without demanding the ball. Now, I don't expect Toronto to boast an elite offense, but they could easily rank 8th or 9th on that end while anchoring a top 5 defense. And that's a proven blueprint for postseason success. You don't need to be completely unstoppable on both ends. You just need to be truly elite at one thing and passable enough at the other. And that is precisely the type of identity I expect Toronto to build next season. And that's exactly where Kawhi changes the math. Against Cleveland in the first round last year, the Raptors pushed them to 7 games. But whenever they desperately needed a late game bucket, they lacked that clear-cut option to run the playthrough. Kawhi instantly gives them that go-to closer. Meanwhile, Scotty gets to slide into what I believe is his absolute perfect role as the second option and primary connective playmaker. You could even argue that Toronto would have beaten Cleveland a year ago if Emmanuel Quickley hadn't missed that entire series with an injury. Now, you are getting Quickley back healthy and adding Kawhi to a roster that fell just one single win short of advancing. Of course, health's always the massive asterisk because this is Kawhi Leonard since 2019. Practically every single playoff run of his has been derailed by injuries. But even if he sits 15 or 20 games in the regular season, Toronto can easily pivot back to their identity from last year. A gritty, hard-nosed defensive squad full of fierce competitors who find ways to win games. If LeBron James had ended up signing with Miami, I'd rank the Heat over Toronto, but he didn't. And right now, I prefer Toronto's balance over both Miami and Philadelphia. It sounds crazy, but I could easily see Toronto reaching the conference finals and giving themselves a real shot to actually win the East. But as the odds-on favorite to win the Eastern Conference, I have to go with the defending champion New York Knicks. Now, I do have some real doubts about them going back-to-back in this modern era. Just making it back to the finals is incredibly tough. Even Oklahoma City couldn't get back there last season. Transitioning from the hunter to the hunted is never easy, since every single opponent is going to give you their absolute best shot. Still, I couldn't slide them out of that number one spot because almost every threat behind them is still just a theory on paper. We haven't actually seen Toronto with Kawhi, Indiana with Zubac, Philadelphia with LeBron, or Miami with Giannis. Any of those lineups could work, but they could also completely fall apart. New York is the one truly stable team in the East right now, which is wild to admit after years of this franchise being a total mess. But today, they are the proven champions. Their starting lineup is completely intact, and we all remember how dominant they were offensively while still locking things down on defense. That said, losing Mitchell Robinson is going to hurt them a lot. And with Andre Drummond stepping in to replace him, you definitely take a step back defensively during the regular season. I don't expect New York to burn themselves out chasing the top seed, honestly. They probably finish second, third, or fourth, and they will be completely fine once the postseason starts. That's because their main starting unit simply operates at such an elite level. And in this breakdown, I look at the 10 best starting lineups in the league for the 2027 season. If you want to see where New York ranks, then you can go ahead and watch that video right now.